Hello, greetings. I am Gilles Mansillon. I come back to you to read the English version of my book. It is called Beyond the Veils of Illusion, I Am, Chapter 8. In the fall of 1989, I returned to Hollywood after spending a few months in Santa Fe to manage an art gallery. Then I moved into a large loft space that belonged to my stepfather, Frederick Souls, while he was exploiting his gold mine in Lone Pine in Northern California. Souls was very talented, just as much for his painting, his sculpture, his theatrical writing, or his poetry, as well as other creative activities. He was also a brilliant mineralogist, chemist, and businessman, and I'm sure he would have really marked his time if he did not short-circuited his mortal career with his extreme alcoholism. Notwithstanding this problem, he was a great inspiration for me, an irreplaceable mentor, and a precious assistant in my earliest artistic career. It is then around that time when I returned to Los Angeles that I began to personally create art that was original and on canvas. My first series of important artworks were a series of 64 pastels on paper on the I Ching that I had created in Santa Fe. When coming back to Hollywood and living in this monumental loft, I thought I could easily recreate on canvas that which I had manifested on paper with my pastels. But I continued to hit the same problems over and over again. That problem was that I felt that my work on canvas were too resembling to other artists that were historically famous. I eventually reached a result that was completely satisfying and very personal to me, but not in the way that I had envisioned at first. My first important series of painting on canvas were expressionist paintings where I usually applied heavy layers of paint, sprayed or dripped, and then wrote spiritual texts that were floating on top of the canvases. I realized at that time that my visual result on those canvases were becoming very original. From the time I began to write on them. But once that was done, I realized at that time that the visual result of those canvases were not as original in their form until I began to write on them. But once that was done, those paintings were fully satisfying to me, as well as complete and original. Those were the first painting I personally produced that could be considered to be both unique and personal to me. I could even sense that those paintings possess interdimensional and even timeless qualities. It was interesting to realize later that my first result on canvas arrived a few days before the mid-November 1989, and at the same moment on the other side of the world, another wall, that of the Berlin Wall, was falling. I realized that it took me 7 years after leaving art school to forget all those academical principles so that I may create art that was absolutely unique and personal. But the result was obvious, and that mission was accomplished. After that, it took me a number of years to find harmony with the fact that I was now an artist as well as an art dealer, as it was still my central activity at the time. Most of the texts that I was using in my paintings were transcripts of the Truth by God, as well as certain extracts from my favorite poets and philosophers such as Lao Tzu, not number 50, Confucius, not number 51, Buddha, as well as more romantic texts like those of Charles Baudelaire, or other initiatic messages that had central importance for me and my personal development. I was not painting for anyone but me, and only the pleasure to see those paintings hanging on my wall was the prime motivator of my creation. Although my paintings have radically changed over the years, my process and intentions have remained the same, in the sense that I continue to create in the context in order to satisfy my own vision and to see my art be a reflection of my spiritual evolution. Oh, I'm sorry, the notes didn't show up. I'm gonna see if I can get the note back. Lao Tzu, number 50. Venerated as the grand founder of Taoism, esoteric school of internal alchemistry, Born in Wuhan, China, around 570 BC. The legend wants that at the moment of his birth, his hair was already white, thereby his name Lao Tzu, Lao, elderly, and Tse, child, meaning elderly child. His doctrine of infallible wisdom is based on action by non-action, in perfect harmony with the great nature, and it is exposed in the Tao Te Ching, the sacred book of Tao and its virtue, in which he also defines a cosmology that proceeds from the creator principle, the unnameable and undefinable Tao. His life is not very well known. All that we know is that he was a clerk at the court of Chu, and that the famous philosopher Confucius paid him a visit in the year 501 BC. Tradition says that he would have he had the idea to reform China, but understood that it was impossible, and at the age of 80 he decided to travel to India with the intention of meeting the Buddha. He then was observed leaving the world. It had been written that the Tao Te Ching was left to a custom agent leaving China, as he was observed leaving our world riding a blue buffalo, animal from the sphere of the celestial immortals. From esoterical tradition, Lao Tzu has been revealed as one of the three personalities of the celestial tribunal of the three fundamental spiritual doctrines in the cosmic universe from which all philosophies and all religious currents come from. Note number 51, Confucius. Coming from the Chinese Kung Fu Tzu, he is a famous humanist philosopher who founded Confucianism, born in Chuli in the hamlet of Chongping or Chongtong in the state of Lu, China, in 1551 BC, and disappeared in the year 479 BC. He codified moral and defined the three social link: king and subject, father and son, and husband and wife, and the five cardinal virtues: humanity, faithfulness, civility, rationality, and loyalty, by establishing the model of an honest man or the superior man, all filled with a sense of human dignity. He taught wisdom in many states of China at the time of the fighting kingdoms. He trained 70 principal eminent disciples who followed him in all his peregrination. His humanist doctrine is based on the famous adage: perfect human conduct, stoicism, familial understanding, good management of the country, and pacifying the people. Known as the philosopher of the Central Way and as the moral law, the teachings of Confucius are known to us by the four classical books: the Book of High Study, the Book of the Central Way, the Book of the Discourse, and the Book of the Precepts of Mencius, and the five canonic books: the Book of Mutation, the Book of the Annals, the Book of the Odds, the Book of the Rites, and the Book of the Spring and the Autumn. Historical canon written by Confucius himself, constituting the chronicle of the event of the state of Lu between the year 7072 and the year 484 BC. And he is playing a major role in all nations of the Far East and their cultural Chinese influence. Return to my reading. I came to realize that the fact that I was not only painting those for myself, but also for the whole of humanity, present and future, because those paintings are presenting and representing universal concept of truth that will be needed to be explored throughout the eternal future. I know that they will eventually be appreciated by the mainstream public, even if many people I know do not comprehend those works, or why am I applying so much time to create those paintings rather than do art that would be already accepted as a part of what is now our present day acceptable art society. I'm sorry, what art that could be acceptable in present day society. I hope that in due time the human community will come to appreciate them for their interdimensional qualities, but also for their aesthetics and even therapeutic properties. I sense that the opportunity will soon be given to me to show those artworks around the world, and that fill my heart with joy and gratitude as far as my creative process. When I painted those first paintings, I had to to spend hundreds of hours writing and rewriting those spiritual texts in those sacred scriptures generated in me a tremendous psychic transformation. That was on a subconscious level at first, but then with the passage of time it became more and more conscious on how that creative process affected my life. This greatly accelerated my spiritual progress and gave me access to spiritual spheres and understanding that I could not even begin to suspect or imagine before encountering them. This process of creating action led me to integrate more love, more light, more courage into my life and into my daily reality. This process allowed me to understand deeply some of the spiritual state and also identifying with those realities of spirit. Even if the future was still vague, the simple fact that I was able to create this sort of spiritual work that were bringing me so much joy, as it was providing me a path that was unfolding in a unique creative process. In this process, this process had became a little obsessive at times, as I was very passionate and focused entirely on those creations. Those paintings were captivating my attention in a way that was almost omnipresent. Then I had to begin to think on how I could make my transition between my life as a creator and my art brokerage activities that were still at that time my main professional activities. That took me many years to be able to clearly determine my priority and achieve a harmonious balance between those many and diverse aspects and activities. This series of paintings on spiritual philosophy and this period of expressionist and calligraphic expression went from the fall of 1989 until the end of the year 1991. Only my work on paper was able to provide me a way to create art that was not dominated by writing or spiritual philosophy or poetry. It was only when I worked on paper that I could do things that showed some variation, because all the works on canvas were all following the same creative line and style of representation. Near the end of that period, I could use text only partially, and even let some empty space at time in the construction of the composition. I eventually realized that painting those work was a way for me to open my channels and communicate with the world of spirit. Ever since that day, that has been my leading intention in my process of creation, and in one way or the other. Painting has become a form of salvation, a mean by which to keep my joy in life. I also understood that painting those kind of artwork was also a co-creative process with the universe that I was doing with the universe. I also realized that through that creative capacity, that I had to be careful of what I was thinking, because I understood that sooner or later our thoughts are becoming realities. Our thoughts, our words, and our deeds are different phases of our expression. To arrive at a point where we are able to control our thoughts allow one to be more in control of one's words and one's action. We can say that those are three phases of our human experience and expression, but are in reality three different levels of action and each of those phases are like buffers that allow us a time of reflection before we are producing act as such. In a general rule, if we are sincere and in harmony with ourselves, our thoughts are the source of our words, and our words the origins of our action. In such a case, then it is on the thought level that the control needs to be applied, so that we may have more control over our words, and so our action will be more intelligent. Without wanting to deny the possibility of spontaneity, charitable or compassionate action, when we speak too much or out of alignment, we may even find ourselves in difficult situations, and that is even more so when it comes to erroneous action. And so I came to the conclusion that we needed to relearn to think, to become aware that our thoughts are creative and that they are the producer of our future reality. The idea of only validating positive thoughts allow us to know that we will be encountering positive situations in the future. Also, that help us to prevent against illness, because most of those come from erroneous thoughts that have created root and anchored themselves in our consciousness, and the illness is the side effect. The manifestation of such a negative thoughts that are here to educate us to think better. That being said, it is difficult to generalize on such a subject because illness may have all sorts of causes. Some of them may come from our genetic background, from our nutrition, or may appear as a result of condition of exposure of our physical body to dangerous or toxic element, or from a biological standpoint. Toxic standpoint from a biological standpoint, or by our lifestyle. But usually it is within our mind that one needs to look into in order to find the cause of an illness, so that we may uproot it, and so that to be certain not to encounter the illness again that is the consequence of such erroneous thinking. When arriving at a point of purification of our thought, when we are able to keep only the positive one, we are also protecting ourselves against all kinds of negative situations that may otherwise be presented to us. To be able to keep only good thoughts within our mind is also a means by which to know that our words and deeds will always be kind and intelligent, and so in accordance with the way of reason, as well as to prevent unconscious negative manifestations that are coming from the negative mental projection that always find a way into our life if we are not careful of our thoughts. In other words, we need not give emotional power to negative thoughts and let them go with indifference and without resistance. And if and when such a thought may appear into our consciousness, only good and positive thought must be charged with emotion so that they may manifest swiftly into our reality of the physical world. To be able to give power only to positive thought may help us also to avoid stress, which is one of the primary causes of premature aging, when laughter and joy have a contrary and beneficial effect in as much as in psychosomatic terms as in purely biological context. And so it is always important to find a comfortable position, a position of peace and relaxation, so that we may act with lucidity and so to be able to expect positive result. If we are not in this position, if we are stressed out, then it is then probably better to do nothing at all and to relax, to breathe deeply and slowly until the point where we are able to regain our peace of mind, our calm nature, and so to return to action only when we have recovered our lucidity, because it is near impossible to believe that anyone can be of use to anyone else or any situation when we are agitated, confused or stressed. End of chapter 8. Thank you.